Israel's gone too far for the first time in my lifetime.
The sites have not only become death traps, they were designed as death traps.
You voted as a member of the House to sanction the ICC for indicting Benjamin Netanyahu, who you just admitted is a war criminal.
In my most frank assessment, I would say that they're criminal. In my entire career, have I never witnessed the level of brutality and use of indiscriminate and unnecessary force against a civilian population, an unarmed, starving population. I've never witnessed that in all of the places I've been deployed to war until I was in Gaza at the hands of the IDF and US contractors.
The gentleman you just heard from is not only an American, he's actually Lieutenant Colonel Anthony Aguilar, who's a retired US Green Beret, who actually decided to volunteer and sign up for the humanitarian aid distribution in Gaza. Now, as you can tell, he quit after experiencing what he referred to as the deliberate slaughter of desperate and hungry Palestinian civilians. In fact, here's more.
This is not a battlefield, though it might look like one. It's a food distribution point in Gaza. Bullets are kicking up the sand as men wait to get food. It's one of 4 sites run by the so-called Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, a joint Israeli-US scheme they say replaces the UN and keeps food away from Hamas. This video is of the foundation's armed American security guards opening fire.
I think you hit one.
It was filmed by a US soldier who signed up for the operation in Gaza after he retired and left, he says, when he saw American colleagues and the IDF killing civilians. The soldier is Lieutenant Colonel Anthony Aguilar, a Special Forces veteran of the US Army's Green Berets.
I witnessed the Israeli Defense Forces shooting at the crowds of Palestinians. I witnessed the Israeli Defense Forces firing a main gun tank round from the Merkava tank into a crowd of people, destroying a car of civilians that were simply driving away from the site.
Now that was a retired member of the United States military, a former Green Beret, an individual who isn't shielding the public from his identity. He is speaking openly, candidly, while revealing his identity in regard to what he saw firsthand in Gaza. So for anyone coming at people like me who go on Piers Morgan's show and essentially share the same information, who accuse people like me of being some sort of anti-Semite for doing so, you're gonna call him an anti-Semite? Or is it just considered unacceptable to ever call out the war crimes that are being committed by the IDF and the Israeli government? Now, the United States says that they're going to do something about this, that they're going to do something about the fact that Palestinians are literally starving to death as we speak. We're gonna get to that in just a moment, but first I wanna go to Cenk.
Yeah, so look, it's unprecedented what Israel's doing to Gaza. The only reason, if you don't know that, the only reason you don't know that is because our mainstream media covers it up assiduously. They feel like it's part of their job to do propaganda for the Israeli government. So did you know that Israel has already killed 49 times the civilians that Hamas did on October 7th? So that's 49 October 7ths in Gaza, okay? So if we were outraged by 1 October 7th, how outraged are we by 49? Did you know that Israel has already killed 300 more civilians waiting for food in line for just enough for their children to survive? 300 more of those civilians killed than Hamas killed on October 7th. Imagine if Hamas was killing people, Israeli Jews who were starving and waiting for food for their children, if Hamas was just killing them one by one by one and had already killed 300 more than they did on October 7th. We would have nuked Gaza by now, right? But when Israel does it, they make up pretty little lies to tell you, oh no, the bad guys made us do it, and 1,000 other lies. If the Israeli government is speaking, the Israeli government is lying. They have dropped the equivalent of 6 Hiroshima-sized bombs in Gaza. They have absolutely leveled the place. But no amount of starvation, no amount of anguish, no amount of death is enough for this radical terrorist government of Israel.
Well, to be fair, there were Israeli ministers at the very beginning of this genocide who said they wanted to nuke Gaza, and they have essentially done that without having to use an actual nuke. Now, while the depraved slaughter and daily war crimes are committed in Gaza, on the other side, in Israel, there's a lookout point that's been established so Israelis can essentially gawk at the Palestinians and their suffering.
Mohammed and his mother Hidayah were filmed by one of the trusted Palestinian freelancers we work with in Gaza, who are themselves starving. Israel does not allow international journalists to enter the territory. So we went to a spot overlooking Gaza, a vantage point in the frontline town of Sderot, where Hamas attacked and killed Israeli civilians on the 7th of October 2023. Israelis come here to look at the war, only a few miles away. Since my last visit, vending machines have been installed if anyone needs refreshment. From here, it feels like looking out of one world into another, not distant, but remote and isolated.
Imagine the type of scum you have to be to take a photo like that in front of the devastation in Gaza, as if you're at a tourist site and it's something cute and fun to do.
No, I'm gonna jump in there. That's like taking a picture in front of a concentration camp for the Germans back then in the 1940s and going, this is where we're starving the Jews. Hey, it's a tourist spot. Hey, let's put it on Insta.
Disgusting.
It's disgusting. It's morally depraved. What are you taking a picture of? The murdered Palestinian children? And that's not government officials. There's something wrong, unfortunately, these days in the culture of Israel.
I agree.
Look, there's good news buried in this story. We're gonna get to it in a second, but a lot of tragedy.
So let's talk about the starvation, the hunger that is now killing Palestinians, especially Palestinian children. In the video that we just showed you, you could see one of those children who is skin and bones. It's absolutely devastating. Now, one of the arguments that oftentimes are uttered by various members of the Israeli government is that we're not trying to starve the Palestinians. It's just that we're blocking aid into Gaza, or we're being incredibly deadly in how we distribute our aid because we're worried about Hamas stealing it. Well, interestingly enough, there was a piece published in the New York Times over the weekend. It's rare for the New York Times to publish pieces like this, but I do commend them for doing it. It's titled, "No Proof Hamas Routinely Stole UN Aid, Israeli Military Officials Say." Let me just repeat that last part again. Israeli military officials say. So members of Israel's own military admit, no, Hamas actually is not stealing the UN aid in the Gaza Strip. I'm gonna give you a few more details from the piece. David Mencer, an Israeli government spokesman, blamed Hamas and poor coordination by the United Nations for any food shortages, but the Israeli military never found proof that the Palestinian militant group had systematically stolen aid from the United Nations, the biggest supplier of emergency assistance to Gaza for most of the war, according to 2 senior Israeli military officials and 2 other Israelis involved in the matter. The military officials who spoke to the New York Times said that the original UN aid operation, UNRWA by the way, was relatively reliable and less vulnerable to Hamas interference because the United Nations managed its own supply chain and handled distribution directly inside Gaza. They say there was no evidence that Hamas regularly stole from the United Nations, which provided the largest chunk of the aid. Now, additionally, there's some more evidence that falls in line with what these Israeli military officials are saying. An internal US government analysis came to a similar conclusion. Reuters reported on Friday. It found no evidence of systematic Hamas theft of US-funded humanitarian supplies, the report said. But of course, that doesn't stop various government officials here in the United States and also in Israel, of course, claiming that Hamas is stealing the humanitarian aid, which is why they have no choice but to starve Palestinians to death. It's a complete and utter joke. It is a lie. Now, with that out of the way, the Gaza Humanitarian Aid Foundation has in fact proven to be lethal for civilians. This was supposed to be the replacement for the UN organization known as UNRWA. Almost 1,100 people have been killed by gunfire on their way to get food handouts under the new system, in many cases by Israeli soldiers who opened fire on hungry crowds. Now, there has been so much backlash over this reality not just by progressives in America, not just by members of the left, but even conservative voters are seeing what's happening on the ground. They're furious about it. And I think that Trump is now feeling some pressure to respond to it. And so for the first time, you're going to hear Trump essentially go against what Benjamin Netanyahu, the prime minister of Israel, has been saying in regard to starving the Palestinians. Israel denies it. Trump says otherwise. So let's go to the next video where you're going to hear Trump address this to some extent.
We want to get the children fed. We made a contribution a week ago of $60 million, all going into food. We only hope the food goes to the people that need it, because so much, as you know, when you do something there, it gets taken by Hamas or somebody. So we've been sending in a lot of food. A lot of the food that's been going there has been sent by the United States. I spoke yesterday with the president of the European Union, Ursula, who was terrific also on the subject, and she's going to play a big role also in helping us. So we have a good group of countries that are going to help with the humanitarian needs, which is food, sanitation, and some other things. So I'm speaking to Bibi Netanyahu, and we are coming up with various plans. We're going to say it's a very difficult situation.
Now, on Sunday, the IDF said that it would be implementing tactical pauses in fighting in some areas of Gaza in order to allow for the distribution of humanitarian aid. Trump also alleges that the United States will ensure that there will be additional distribution areas in order to get more food to the Palestinian people who have very much been intentionally starved. But during that same press conference, Trump also says that he knows there's real starvation because of television. He says, I don't know. I mean, based on television, those children look very hungry. Later, he also said that some of those kids that's real starvation stuff. And he complained about not being thanked for allegedly sending aid to the Palestinian people. Quote, nobody said, gee, thank you very much. And it would be nice to have at least a thank you. What about Israel? Has Israel thanked you? The country that we keep shelling tens of billions of dollars to, and yet the prime minister still comes here on US soil and complains about how we're not doing enough for a foreign country, Israel. But anyway, I digress. Cenk, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so that's going to get us to the good news in a second.
Is it?
Yeah, it is. But first, a couple more things here that need to be pointed out. First of all, one of our YouTube members with a really poignant comment here. Stoner Wolf said, children in Gaza are asking if there's food in heaven.
Okay, I can't.
So Israel's gone too far for the first time in my lifetime. So did they go too far by any moral standards? Dozens of times, of course. Did they go too far? Literally, in my experience, hundreds of times. Yes, of course, hundreds of times in this Gaza incursion alone, right? So I don't mean for any normal moral person who objectively sees the news. I'm talking about reaching the American people. Because in order to reach the American people, first you have to get through a layer of American politicians who are almost all corrupt, almost all have their top donors as AIPAC and Israeli lobby, et cetera, at least the leadership. And if you don't know, I'll say real quick, because you're never gonna hear it in mainstream media, #1 donor to Trump is the Adelsons, militantly right-wing Israeli family. Miriam is literally an Israeli citizen, also a US citizen, and she's demanding the annexation of the West Bank along with Gaza, et cetera. Biden, #1 donor lifetime, AIPAC. 100% of Republican leadership in Congress right now, #1 donor, AIPAC. 75% of Democratic leadership in Congress right now, #1 donor, AIPAC. Okay, so that is the Israeli lobby. Anyone telling you that they don't control those politicians is either lying to you on purpose to protect the government of Israel, or they're a fool. They don't understand how politics works at all. They think, oh yeah, they'll ignore their largest donor. What kind of a moron is that? Well, I'm usually a mainstream media reporter. Okay, so to give you, that's your context, I have more context for you. As Anna pointed out, the UN and US now all confirming, of course the Israelis were lying. They lie almost every single time. Yes, Hamas was not stealing the food, right? So now we know that. Look, guys, if you see the Israeli government talking, especially this day and age, they have a nearly 100% track record of lying. So that's why when mainstream media says, oh, Israel says this, well, that's it then, Israel said it, right? They're either purposely lying to you and protecting for whatever insane reason the government of Israel, not our government, not our citizens, but the government of Israel, or they're fools and they really don't know anything about the news. Oh, we should just a genocidal government. We should take their word for it. Oh, they were willing to starve children to death, but they would never lie to CNN. I mean, you'd be the biggest idiot in the world to believe that. All right, more bad news. If you notice, Anna gave you that stat of 1,100 killed in the way just waiting for food, and you saw the American colonel, clearly saying, "No, there's no question. I saw it with my own eyes." Did you know? So there's 1,200 killed, roughly. It's actually 1,136 or so, 37, something along those lines. Killed on October 7th. Terrible, tragic. We said it a million times. Only, it's a terrible number, but around 800 to 850 of those were civilians. 300 or so were IDF soldiers, right? So now that's what I mean. They've killed 300, everyone waiting in food is a civilian, now confirmed, okay? So that's 300 more civilians killed just waiting for food while they're starving than the great apocalyptic tragedy of October 7th, which were told is the worst thing that's happened since the Holocaust. So if that's the worst thing that's happened since the Holocaust and the Israelis have done 50 times worse, what does that make the Israelis? And by the way, what breaks my heart is that 80% of Israeli Jews say keep going in Gaza. There's something wrong in the culture, okay? These days in that government, not for Jews across the world at all because they didn't grow up in that culture. They grew up here, they grew up in Norway, they grew up in different places. But that culture has got something deeply, deeply wrong with it, and you could see it in the smiling, people taking Instagram photos behind them of starving children. This is where we're murdering the Palestinians. But there are a lot of good Israelis that are coming out and saying, including 2 giant human rights groups today inside Israel, saying, of course it's a genocide. This is absurd. Do you have eyes and ears? Are you human? Of course it's a genocide. So there are good Israelis like there were good Germans, okay? Yes, I'm saying that, and I don't give a goddamn if you're offended. If you're more offended by that than seeing starving children, you lost a thread at some point. You lost your morality at some point, and you need to go and find it. Okay, so finally now, what in the world is good news out of this?
Yeah, seriously.
Okay, so buried deep in European news is that American government has basically told the Israelis, and we're all gonna have to see if this is real, okay? But they were risking full diplomatic breakdown, including with the United States of America. Because one of the reasons, and this is interesting and just like 2% hope here, right? That Trump doesn't like seeing the starving children on TV.
Oh, is he not merciful?
Okay, so, but guys, remember, this is why social media is so important. This is why the Israeli government, according to several US senators, were trying to shut down TikTok in America, because mainstream media is super easy to control. They'll say whatever Israeli propaganda Israel wants, and they will then call everyone who disagrees anti-Semites, and they'll try to ruin their careers and their lives.
Yep.
So they're an Israeli propaganda machine, right? But now they're not in charge anymore. Everybody's seeing it on social media. Everybody's seeing it in online media, in the podcasts, etc. And now it's even gotten to the president. And so the president often doesn't see anything but Fox News, right? Now he's seeing starving kids, and apparently he's saying, no, this is too much, okay? So what has happened, this is the second part that's very important, is that Netanyahu ordered the airdrops that we're reporting on of not only Israel doing it in the beginning, but other countries doing airdrops of food.
Jordan, Egypt, they've been airdropping food into Gaza, yes,
yeah,
but
and
it's
now the
not nearly enough.
Yes, but now the European nations are going to be soon allowed to airdrop, and he is recalibrating as we speak. Now, that genocidal maniac does not recalibrate unless he thinks, our money, the most important thing to Netanyahu, our money is in danger. So if that's true, which I mean, I don't know that would ever happen in America, that our politicians would ever be honest enough to represent us instead of Israel. And if you say that's too much, they literally just gave them $500 million in the middle of a genocide, and the vote was 422 to 6. Israel completely and utterly controls our Congress. But apparently Netanyahu's, for the first time, slightly worried. So he went behind 2 Israeli cabinet ministers' backs, did not notify them. I assume that's Ben-Gvir and Smotrich. And that they are apparently considering leaving the government.
Oh.
Okay, now we've heard this for 2 straight years. That's why I say it's 2% hope, okay? Oh, we're gonna leave. Oh, unless you let us murder all the Palestinians. And by the way, that's literal. Ben-Gvir over the weekend put out a post on X saying, yes, we should starve them, kill them, deny them humanitarian aid and oxygen. So he's in favor of murdering all the Palestinians. So if Netanyahu says, hey, we should only murder half the Palestinians, Ben-Gvir is like, I might leave the government. I signed up for a Holocaust, not a genocide, because Ben-Gvir is a Nazi. So, and he's actually a convicted terrorist. So these literal fascist terrorists are running the government of Israel today. If that bothers you, it should bother you if you love Israel. And you should try to make sure that the country you love is not run by terrorists. Because it definitely is right now.
And I have to end on this because it's important to hear from some people who have some moral clarity within the Israeli government, including Israel's National Security Council deputy head of Israel's National Security Council. Here's what he had to say about why this genocide is ongoing in Gaza. Quote, by now, it has long been clear to most Israelis that the main reason the Gaza campaign lingers on is because of Netanyahu's political, personal, and judicial interests, and he needs the war to go on in order to sustain and even enhance his grip on power. That's the main reason. It has nothing to do with Hamas and everything to do with Netanyahu. That's not an American saying that. That's not some progressive saying that. Even though I've been saying that, put me aside for a second. This is the former deputy head of Israel's National Security Council. You have 2 former Israeli prime ministers, Ehud Olmert and Ehud Barak, admitting that what's happening in that slaughter campaign in Gaza is a genocide, that war crimes are being committed. Let's just call a spade a spade. You don't have to believe me. Okay, if you don't trust me, you think I'm some unhinged lefty, that's fine. But how about for once in everyone's lives, if you've been in denial about what's happening on the ground in Gaza, listen to what the Israelis are saying, both the terrorists in the government and those who used to be in the government.
Obviously, I am a human and want to live, but our civilization does really deserve to be destroyed. If there was ever a civilization that deserved a cataclysmic, and again, not rooting for it, don't want it to happen. But just statistically, I mean, could there be a better example? Nobody is fatter than us. We are now funding the starvation of a group of people halfway across the world, or all the way across the world. I'm bad with geography, but far away. And if you bring it up, or if you chat about it, or if you talk about it, you're immediately called anti-Semitic or whatever. And it's completely absurd and insane.
Which is why it's important to take the power away from those ridiculous false allegations and speak out against the famine, the very intentional man-made famine in Gaza as we speak. Now, as you heard, Tim Dillon, like any human being with a pulse and a conscience, is now questioning the value of human civilization given the unmitigated slaughter of Palestinians and destruction of Gaza, paid for by the fine people of the United States, not because they want to, but because they're literally forced to by our government. And with now hundreds of Palestinians dead as a result of intentional starvation, Dillon really isn't pulling any punches. Take a look.
I mean, this guy is committing a genocide. Like, I know that like people are like, well, yes, they're starving Gaza, but did you see that video of that guy from Hamas stealing a banana? Did you see that? There's a guy from Hamas eating a banana, and people are like, well, he stole the banana from the people. And they're like, Hamas is stealing the food. In this whole thing, Israel has no culpability, by the way, at all. They've actually done nothing wrong. It's all been Hamas. Hamas has done everything. And you have to trust Israel, because otherwise the only people that are reporting out of Gaza, they're not letting journalists in, or they just say are Hamas. So if you report anything contrary to what Israel says, you are Hamas, or you become Hamas. for the fattest country in the world to fund the starvation of a group of people is insane.
And he's not the only comedian who finds this to be insane. Of course, there are also many other commentators who find it insane. But Jon Stewart seems to agree as well, saying on a recent episode of The Daily Show, quote, "I feel like a crazy person. I feel like I'm watching something that is so self-evidently inhumane and horrific. And to be told that I have to shut up because I risk the Jewish state by speaking out, I would say the opposite. I think they're putting the likelihood of a surviving Jewish state much more at risk with this type of action. I think they're the ones that are being anti-Semitic. If you want to define Netanyahu's definition of anti-Semitism, would be he'd probably have to bomb himself." Look, this whole slaughter campaign that has played out in Gaza and is also, by the way, playing out to some extent in the West Bank as Israel attempts to annex that land for themselves. It's all been very illuminating for me, right? Because if you've kind of grown up in a political space where you see everything through a partisan lens, well, that partisan lens is just totally broken apart the second you notice that on both sides of the political aisle, you have folks who totally justify what's happening in Gaza. But also, something that makes me pretty happy is when it comes to voters, you see people on both sides of the political aisle speaking up and speaking out about what's taking place, calling out the injustice, wanting to take the Trump administration to task, even if they voted for Donald Trump. And those are the people who give me hope. Okay, for honestly, when it comes to this issue, partisanship isn't really a good indicator of who's good or bad at all. There's plenty of scum on both sides, but there's also plenty of great people, good voters who are on the right side of history on this issue.
Yeah, so I think that Jon Stewart and Tim Dillon / Theo Vaughn are a perfect 1-2 punch on this issue, okay? So I'm gonna come back to Tim Dillon in a second. But first on Jon Stewart and Peter Beinart conversation, I watched the whole interview. Please watch the whole interview. It was picture perfect. I agreed with every single word spoken, right? And by the way, so they're both Jewish. Beinart wrote a book about it. We'll try to get him on the show. He's not just kind and decent person, but he's really bright, right? He's got both the things you want. And his moral compass is so excellent. And what he explained on the show was, he said, look guys, the people trying to stop this genocide are getting smeared by Israel's supporters. But those are the exact kind of people that would have helped us during the Holocaust. They're the ones who would have been brave enough to say, as no one said anything across the world, my God, what are you doing? What are you doing? I'm morally outraged. We have to go help the Jews in the middle of the Holocaust. Now for us to say, those same people trying to stop this genocide are the hateful ones. Oh, he's like, we're doing great damage. We're doing great damage to our cause, to Israel, to everything, to humanity, and to honoring the memory of the Holocaust. It was really powerful. I don't want to put too many words in their mouth. Please watch it yourself as well. And Stewart was, as always, brilliant, perfect, right? And look, John, and it looks like Peter too, are the exact kind of Jewish tradition and culture that I grew up in and that I love. And what I mean by that is I'm not Jewish, but I grew up in a town that was about 50% Jewish. And that's the Jewish tradition and culture that I always heard about and that I was exposed to. You question the rabbi, you try to educate yourself, you look at yourself first. All of these positive things that they talked about, right? That exists and very strongly among Jewish Americans. And so what they were doing was challenging fellow Jewish Americans and saying, guys, wait, first of all, this is unconscionable. You can't say it's okay. If you say it's okay, it's beyond the pale. You can't do that. And then secondly, Jon Stewart's point was brilliant. He said, wait a minute, if you're saying basically that if you're not pro-genocide, you're anti-Semitic, you're making it seem like Jews are pro-genocide.
Exactly.
He's like, that's anti-Semitic.
It's the total defamation of Jews across the globe, and it disgusts me. Do not conflate the Jewish people with the far-right terrorist regime that's currently governing Israel. Okay, just don't do it. Don't do it. Don't be dumb in falling for that trap because it's stupid and it's inaccurate. There are so many Jewish people around the world, including here in the United States, who are vociferously protesting what Israel is doing. Okay, some of the best voices on this issue happen to be American Jews. Okay, Dave Smith, Glenn Greenwald, I think he's in Brazil, not in the United States, but you get the point. Okay,
Bernie Sanders,
Norm Finkelstein. There's
Mandy
so many.
Patinkin, Rick Jacobs, the rabbi of the largest Jewish denomination in America. The Omer Bartov, the Holocaust historian who's Israeli American,
yes.
And the list goes on and on and on. But unfortunately, there's very powerful people on the side of just supporting Israel and not Jewish Americans and not Jews across the world. And they are doing massive damage all over media.
So I want to give you an update on what's happening in Gaza right now as it pertains to this famine. And anyone who is furious about this is, again, on the right side of history and correct. So at least 147 people have died of malnutrition, according to Gaza's health ministry, including 88 children. The number is almost twice as high as it was a month earlier, meaning that this is now a full-blown famine. People are literally starving to death. And the situation is dire. There's been so much backlash that Israel apparently feels some pressure to ease up on their obvious blockade of aid entering the Gaza Strip. Now, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation only had 4 distribution sites in the entirety of the Gaza Strip, whereas UNRWA had hundreds. And of course, UNRWA was smeared and defamed by the Israeli government as a bunch of Hamas militants. So their operations were banned or severely restricted. Now, they were all intentionally, by the way, the aid sites for the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. All of those sites were located in active combat zones and were barricaded by razor wire, which, by the way, is a violation of the Geneva Convention. But I mean, does anyone think that international law or rules pertaining to war crimes even matter at this point? I mean, the United States aided and abetted the complete dismantling of international laws. How is anyone going to take the United States seriously when they point to any other country engaging in war crimes when we have glazed Israel and provided cover for their war crimes time and time again? Now, Israel said it would ease some of the restrictions in place on allowing aid for the Gazan population. More trucks would be able to enter, secure corridors for their movement would be created, and fighting would pause for 10 hours a day in 3 major population centers to help with distribution. But the Israeli military has actually told the United Nations something entirely different. They claim that this will only be enacted for 1 week, which obviously is not enough considering there's now a famine in Gaza. But publicly, the IDF has changed its story to say that these tactical pauses would last until further notice. I don't trust the IDF. They have shown themselves to be liars, including, by the way, the Israeli government over and over again. You should never take anything they say at face value. Now, the UN World Food Program also says that they're actually still not being allowed to get the necessary volumes of humanitarian aid into Gaza. At a briefing in Geneva, for instance, the senior regional program advisor for the World Food Program said that, quote, "We have not gotten the authorization, the permission to move in the volumes that we've requested." And look, to really get a sense of how insufficient the distribution of aid in Gaza has been, especially at the hands of this, Israeli and US-backed Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, which is essentially a private company funded by US taxpayers to the tune of $60 million. Here's what retired US soldier Anthony Aguilar witnessed for himself when he thought that he was participating in a noble cause and realized it was anything but. Take a look.
The sites have not only become death traps, they were designed as death traps. All 4 distribution locations were intentionally, deliberately constructed, planned, and built in the middle of an active combat zone. We've been distributing aid since the 26th of May. So out of 64 days, we've provided 14 days of meals to the entire population in the enclave of Gaza. That's inhumane. That would be like saying that you only eat every 4th day. You only eat on Thursday and you only eat on Monday. Instead of giving the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation $60 million, Use that $60 million to support the United Nations mechanism to get 400 sites back to operating, to feed 2.1 million people every day. That was the capacity of the United Nations.
Just makes me sick that the US is backing this. Now, the Wall Street Journal has done some reporting on this as well, and they put together this graph that I wanted to share with you because I think it helps the audience, visualize what the reality is. Food supplies in Gaza have dwindled under the new Israeli aid plan, meaning, the distribution through the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. So this chart from the Wall Street Journal demonstrates the dramatic reduction in aid to Gaza after Israel decided to accuse the United Nations Relief and Works Agency, also known as UNRWA, of being Hamas terrorists. Their operations were barred or severely restricted following these allegations, and aid deliveries under the UN coordinated system amounted to 295,120 tons, but that number dropped down to just 38,252 tons after UNRWA was essentially replaced by the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. Now, an area is classified as in famine when it meets 3 conditions. The IPC explained. At least 1 in 3 children are acutely malnourished, 1 in 5 people are suffering extreme food shortages, and 2 in every 10,000 people are dying daily from starvation or malnutrition and disease. Based on the latest data, 2 famine thresholds have been passed, according to the IPC.
Yeah. So first of all, that chart shows you genocidal intent. That is purposely starving them. They were not getting a lot of food when the bars you're looking at seem high compared to what they're getting today. So they're getting next to nothing today, and that's why 147 have already starved to death. Do you know how much starving people to death takes a long time. You have to be brutal for months at a time so that they just can't get any food at all. By the way, baby formula is totally impossible to get in Gaza.
They're blocking it. They're literally blocking it. The IDF is blocking baby formula from entering the Gaza Strip. Why? Why would they want to do that? What's the intent there? What's the justification for that? At some point, those who want to defend what the IDF is doing really need to take a good hard look in the mirror and ask themselves who they want to be in life. Do they want to justify the slaughter of children, the intentional slaughter of children? Or do they want to be decent people who see this for what it really is and call it out? Be a decent human being. This isn't difficult.
And by the way, also don't hide behind your religion, because there's Peter Beinart and Jon Stewart saying, this isn't my religion, this is the opposite of my religion, right? So don't tell me that my religion made you do this. My religion didn't ask you to do this. Your despicable terrorist government is doing this. If you're starving the people to death, you are a terrorist and you are a fascist. That's not hard. If it was being done to Jews, there's not a person in the world who wouldn't call that government a terrorist government and a fascist government. So just stop hiding behind religion. All right, I want to get back to Timberland in a second. But one last thing about the Green Beret that we showed you, Aguilar there. He also told a harrowing story of this young boy who came up and asked them for food. They were out of food, so he couldn't give it to them. But he'd already gotten some earlier. He was just seeing, and they all get a tiny, tiny amount. And the kid's skin and bones, according to Aguilar. And he said, I'm sorry, I don't have any. The kid, of course, just says thank you in Arabic, right? And he said thank you. The kid said thank you, even though we're starving them to death. A minute later, as they were walking away, the IDF killed them. So if that doesn't bother you guys, there's something missing. You lost the thread at some point.
Yeah, you're a sociopath.
Like that's sociopathic bias, right? And I know, like ethnic bias will do that to you. There's.
No, look. I got to be honest with you. No,
Anna, I know it. Like there's Turks who are good people, but the minute you ask them about the Armenian genocide, they'll say no way, didn't happen, totally fictional, and they'll get enraged about it. And they were lovely people otherwise.
I get it.
By the way, also Japanese about the rape of Nanking, and on it goes.
I know, Cenk, and I get that, especially in the context of propaganda that has basically continued over the last century in regard to that genocide. But you can't deny what's being streamed in real time in front of your face as we speak. It's happening now. It's happening now.
Yes, and that's exactly what Jon Stewart said as well. He's like, you're being ridiculous. We all see it. Why do you think we don't see it? It's just maddening. Last thing is back to Dylan. I think he's getting at something that's really important, and that's why Israel is now making a huge mistake. He's saying, look guys, when we're saying please stop the genocide, please stop starving these children, Israel is telling us we're the bad guys. We hate Jews, that's why we don't want to starve children. No, I'm done with you telling me I'm the bad guy for wanting to save lives.
I was done on day one.
Yeah, and so somebody, one of our members wrote in saying, hey guys, you've been saying this from day one. These guys are catching up to you. God bless, I want them to catch up. I don't mind, I don't care about the credit. So yes, it took them way too long, but to be fair, it's not on them. Mainstream media was terrible. Dylan and Jon Stewart have been way better throughout, right? But the core of what Dylan is saying is Israel isn't getting. When they are now telling everyone, you're a bad person if you're not in favor of funding our genocide, it's making people angry. No, it makes every decent human being want to say, no, F you, I'm not the bad guy, you're the bad guy. And people are finally beginning to figure out that Israel might not be the victim. I mean, that's so obvious to the rest of the world. But if you don't live in America, the propaganda here is so overwhelming. Israel can do the most horrific things, and American media will tell you they're the victim. They're the victim. So that spell is breaking, and now people are going, no, they're not the victim. And now it's becoming obvious they're the villain. And if that's where you think Israel is in a better spot, you're nuts.
We don't have actually a lot of senators, especially ones who have very different ideology than us. I don't really hear what you say if you are still supporting a genocide in Gaza.
But I go outside the Detroit area, it's not in the top 40.
You voted for some of the aid that's been used to massacre children and innocents.
Do you think AIPAC should register as a foreign lobby?
I don't know the answer to that.
I think you do. I think you do know the answer to that. Well, Democratic Senator Elisa Slotkin made an appearance over at Breaking Points where she was grilled by hosts Sagar and Jetty and Crystal Ball on a whole host of issues. Much of the conversation focused on the ongoing genocide in Gaza, but they also did touch on the Epstein files and the future of the Democratic Party. We'll have a link to the full interview in the description box if you want to watch the whole interview, and I do recommend it. It's not too long and it's worth watching in its entirety. But for the purposes of this discussion, I wanted to focus on the portion of their discussion that pertains to Gaza and the current behavior of the Israeli government and the IDF. Because to me, no story really highlights how little political labels make sense these days than the way Elisa Slotkin handled the questions coming from the likes of Sagar and Jetty and Crystal Ball. And they asked fantastic questions, important questions, questions that I wish were almost a given, regardless of which media entity is interviewing her. But alas, you have to rely on independent media to ask the types of questions that you're going to hear answers for as we cover this story. So before we start on her views, on Elisa Slotkin's views, I think it's kind of important to give you a bit of a bio. Who is she? What does she represent? What has she done in her career prior to getting elected in office? Well, before starting her first term as a United States Senator this year, she was a congresswoman between the years of 2019 and 2025. She was inaugurated this year actually or sworn in this year to serve as her first term as US Senator. She represented Michigan's 7th district when she was serving in the House. She also worked for the CIA as an analyst and a Department of Defense official. During the George W. Bush administration, she worked on the Iraq portfolio for the National Security Council. Fun. And from 2015 to 2017, Slotkin was acting assistant secretary of defense for international security affairs, where one of her responsibilities was securing Israel's qualitative military edge. Now, as we go through all these various clips from the interview, I just want you to keep in the back of your mind the fact that Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, a Republican, someone who we have been pretty vicious toward on this show, was the first Republican congresswoman to call what's happening in Gaza a genocide. And she did so in the context of skewering her Republican colleague in the House, Randy Fine. I just want you to keep that in the back of your mind as we hear from a Democratic lawmaker about what's currently transpiring in Gaza and the behavior of Israel and the IDF. Now look, she has consistently voted in favor of Israel or in favor of things that Israel wants. She's consistently voted yes to more military aid to Israel and opposes conditioning US security aid to Israel. So offensive weapons, no problem, we're not gonna condition it. She has voted in favor of a resolution to essentially equate anti-Zionism or criticism of the Israeli government to anti-Semitism. She did vote in favor of the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act. And she, of course, opposes the boycott, divest movement, otherwise known as BDS. Now, with all of that in mind, maybe you'll understand why it is that she wants to downplay the severity of not only what's happening in Gaza, but the severity of anger that many Americans, especially Democratic voters, are feeling in regard to what's transpiring in Gaza. Because remember, we're funding it. Whether you want to support it or not, you have no choice. Okay, your tax dollars are funding the slaughter that's currently taking place in Gaza as we speak. So with that in mind, let's see how serious Slotkin finds this to be.
While, I would love to debate you on your healthcare policy. I think we need Medicare for all. You think public option, your housing policy, et cetera. I'm just being really real with you. I don't really hear what you say if you are still supporting a genocide in Gaza.
One of the proudest moments that I had in my last election, where I just won on the same ballot as Donald Trump, was that I won a majority of Jewish voters in Michigan. We have a large Jewish population. And I won Dearborn Heights, and Hamtramck, the 3 Muslim-dominated cities. I'm a Middle East analyst by training. And so what I tried to do and why I think I managed to win both those communities is call balls and strikes, literally up to this week. But it's not the only issue that my voters in Michigan care about.
Of course.
And the online world is extremely focused on this, but that doesn't always represent the majority. But I go outside the Detroit area, it's not in the top 40.
Wow, you won your election, that's great. What does that have to do with your views on what's happening in Gaza? And you call balls and strikes, what balls and strikes are you calling? You consistently support anything and everything Israel wants. Sure, there might be some rhetorical pushback, but you can take that rhetorical pushback and you can shove it. It's as relevant and as valuable as the rhetorical pushback Joe Biden engaged in as Israel was carrying out, the initial phases of its ethnic cleansing slaughter campaign in Gaza. What balls and strikes? Show me an example of Slotkin in any way through her actions checking the Israeli government, because I haven't seen it. And to say, most Americans don't really care about this issue. You're trying to downplay it? The American government right now is literally taking resources out of the pockets of hardworking Americans, whether they like it or not, and funneling it to a terroristic government who's carrying out the ethnic cleansing and genocide of Palestinians in Gaza. They're literally building a concentration camp as we speak. Okay, the days of trying to let me tiptoe around this. Let me try to strategize around this. Let me not upset people who, for whatever reason, live in the United States but think Israel is the most important thing in the world. Let me not upset those folks. No, now is the time. Now is the time to ask yourself whether you have a moral compass or not. And honestly, after watching this interview, no moral compass, especially as it pertains to Israel. It's disgusting. So she's also lying, and you'll notice that it's a theme throughout this conversation. We'll get to her other lies in a minute, but since she's talking about the fact that most voters don't care, it's not even in their top 40. It's not even in their top 40. Really, it's not? Okay. Well, how do Democratic voters feel about what's happening in Gaza right now? Turns out the latest Gallup poll found that, oh wow, actually, No, maybe it's not that bad. Maybe it's not that bad. It's just that only 8% of Democratic voters support what the Israeli government is doing. So 32% of Americans, let's put it back up. So only 32% of Americans approve of Israel's military action taken in Gaza. That's actually down 10 percentage points since last September. So only a minority of American voters overall support what's going on. But when it comes to Democrats, only 8% support Israel's actions. The lowest approval rating to date. Compare that to 25% of independents and sadly, a robust 71% of Republicans. Turn off the Fox News. Your government's taking money out of your pocket and funneling it for the mass slaughter of children. You wanna talk about being pro-life? How is it pro-life when your money is supporting the slaughter of countless children in Gaza? Unbelievable, but anyway, not a big deal. Most people don't care. Most people don't have strong thoughts about this, not even in their top 40. Elisa Slotkin is really concerned about the economy. She wants to make the economy better for Michiganders. I mean, she hasn't really proven it in her time in the House of Representatives or her short stint in the Senate so far. But I care about the economy is a great, it's a great talking point to like pivot to when you don't want to talk about the fact that you're aiding and abetting the slaughter of innocent people in Gaza. But we have more. So the political angle, I just want to be clear, really does pale in comparison to the moral bankruptcy of continuing to support Israel's slaughter campaign. That's what I think. So a lot of these politicians, they're only thinking about, okay, well, how is this gonna affect me politically? And I know that's what Elisa Slotkin is thinking about. It's what every politician is thinking about. God forbid, for a second, they allow themselves to have a principled or moral view of something that's happening in the world. But again, the moral bankruptcy of it all, to me, is a big deal. So is Slotkin willing to ever do anything to check Israel? And I'm really glad that question was asked in the context of this interview. So let's take a look at what she had to say about that.
You have backed Israel, as far as I can tell, from your voting record at almost every turn. You voted for a definition of anti-Semitism that would, codify anti-Zionism as anti-Semitism. You voted as a member of the House to sanction the ICC for indicting Benjamin Netanyahu, who you just admitted is a war criminal, by your own words. So are you going to join Senator Angus King, Senator Bernie Sanders in saying no more aid to this country that is committing war crimes against innocent civilians?
I think the first thing, if you're asking about what to do with power, and I would offer that right now, Democrats own nothing in Washington. So
don't play powerless with me. You're a United States senator. There are things you can do.
There really isn't much to add to that because I think Crystal did a good job responding to her pathetic answer by saying, "Don't play powerless with me." I mean, it's just hilarious. Just a second ago, Senator Slotkin was bragging about her big accomplishment in getting the majority of Jews and Arabs in her state to support her for her Senate seat. I'm so big and powerful. I did such an amazing job getting elected. Look at me. Oh, you want me to do something? I have no power. I'm just a United States senator. Okay. Slotkin had a pretty bad response to a question about whether or not she supports continuing to send military aid to Israel, especially since, rhetorically she has pushed back a little bit. She did call Benjamin Netanyahu a war criminal. Now, if I think someone's a war criminal and I'm representing people either as a senator or a member of the House of Representatives, I would never in a million years take money out of the pockets of my constituents and then funnel it to the war criminal. But what about Slotkin? Would she do that?
But will you cut off aid to Israel so long as they're committing crimes against humanity?
There is a difference between a weapon to protect a country from incoming missiles versus other type. Offensive and defensive weapons are different.
So would you support offensive weapons ban? Like, would you stop any offensive aid to Israel?
That certainly, to me, would be a place to look, but I'm not gonna cut off a blanket next sale on a defensive weapon that comes through. No.
I also reject that because, for example, if Senator Slotkin, if you were asked to support defensive weapons for Iran, defensive weapons for Russia, you wouldn't back that.
No, but Iran, but
they're defensive. They're just protecting civilians, right?
Right.
So how is it different?
But because Israel's being shot at.
Well, so is Russia.
So is Iran.
Yeah.
So is Russia.
Ukraine's shooting at Russia right now.
I'm sorry. This is the difference between allies, partners, and adversaries.
So
what
if
they're
Nazi
doing
Germany,
every single day,
if Nazi Germany said we want defensive aid, I mean, it's just you have to see where they're all weapons that are being shipped. You know, in another context,
the weapons that they're using right now, I mean, to be honest, if you look at what's happening on the ground, the military part of this conflict is, for the most part, over. What they are doing,
Senator,
every single day is around aid.
Okay, I want to be clear about Senator Slotkin. She will continue to vote yes on every bill to send more military aid to Israel, whether it has to do with defensive weaponry or offensive weaponry. Okay, it doesn't matter. She's gonna vote yes, and her voting record shows she is in favor. Okay, she will vote yes. Now, putting that aside, let's just briefly discuss defensive weapons. Now, I'm on the record months ago, last year, saying that I support continuing, providing what's needed for the Iron Dome, providing what's needed in terms of defensive weaponry. I have since changed my mind, and this is a perfect opportunity to talk about that. The reason why I've changed my mind is because I do believe that Israel is carrying out a genocide right now. And I do equate the current Israeli government to Nazis. Why would I want to provide resources to a regime like that is essentially carrying out the mass slaughter of innocent people, not just in Gaza, not just in the West Bank, but also in neighboring countries? They've bombed Syria, they've bombed Lebanon. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. And guess what? Why do they feel emboldened to do that? Because they can do it with impunity. Israel gets to operate on the international stage very differently than everyone else. They are held to a much lower standard. What international laws? What war crimes? No, Israel's special. They get to do whatever they want. And there are never any consequences. Now, usually any other country on the international stage would know if you attack another sovereign country, there's very likely gonna be blowback. Okay, that information, that fear, that prediction usually plays into the equation and the decision making. With Israel, we just keep fueling, the war with, enhancing their defensive capabilities. So they get to do whatever they want. They get to attack whoever they want. They get to kill whoever they want with no consequences, ever. And I'm not okay with that. So I am 100% against funding anything for Israel at this point. If they care about their civilians, maybe they would rethink what they've been carrying out. Maybe they would rethink attacking their neighbors. Maybe they would reconsider openly bragging about starving innocent people to death, as Bezalel Smotrich and Ben Gvir so openly do on a regular basis. But right now, they're not reconsidering that. They're acting like unhinged genocidal lunatics because we have empowered them to do so. Now, maybe Slotkin feels this way because she doesn't see the mass slaughter that the IDF is engaging in for what it really is. And this part of the conversation made that clear to me.
Is it a
So that
genocide?
people don't starve. I don't know that I'd use that term,
Why?
but it is violating the law of war.
Why don't you use the term though?
Because I think, it's, to me, do I think it's ethnic cleansing, which is what I think of in genocide? I don't know if it meets that definition.
They're
Yeah, but
announcing
didn't you say it earlier that it was ethnic cleansing? You said that they wanted to force them. I mean, this is open from the Israeli government. Like, they're saying it. Their
And from
Minister
Trump,
of National
too.
Security, they come out and they're like, we don't need shells. We need shells, not food. And we need to encourage migration.
Look,
they're saying it.
You're not going to get me to support what the Israeli government is saying right now. Right. I think the point I was trying to make is it's not just about, like, we have relationships with nations over time, regardless of who their leaders are.
That was a great catch by Sagar Enjeti because she did call it ethnic cleansing earlier in the interview when it was convenient for her to do so. But then, ooh, it came up again and it was inconvenient for her. Ooh, what am I gonna do? You have two humanitarian organizations within Israel, B'Tselem being one of them, by the way, who have now called this a genocide. You have an Israeli genocide scholar who we covered on the show just last week or the week before, calling this what it is, a genocide. A scholar, an Israeli scholar. He wrote a piece about it, an opinion piece in the New York Times, which I hope you all read. You have two former Israeli prime ministers who were not doves, who committed war crimes of their own, calling this what it is. But you can't get a Democratic senator to at least call it ethnic cleansing, which, by the way, the Israeli government is openly announcing. They're openly announcing it. Now, I'm pretty black-pilled at this point. I think people in the audience, and I don't blame you for this, everyone goes through their own journey, and I think a lot of you are actually gonna get to where I'm at right now, and I don't envy you because it's a pretty dark place. But I'm so black-pilled that the parties mean nothing to me, nothing. Democrat, Republican, who cares? They mean nothing to me, okay? And the reason why they mean nothing to me is because of, honestly, the kind of crap that I heard from Bernie Sanders today in his interview with Caitlin Collins. He has the right ideas. He wants to stop funding the weapons toward Israel. I mean, the defensive weapons I'm curious about, but nonetheless, policy-wise, but he doesn't want to call it a genocide. You can't respond to it effectively unless you call it what it is, unless you understand the real severity of it. But who knows, maybe Senator Sanders and maybe Senator Slotkin just know better than the Israeli genocide scholar who was willing to call what's happening in Gaza what it is. And it is real pathetic when someone I have admired in the political space for so long, Senator Bernie Sanders, gets outflanked by the likes of Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, who on the House floor called out Israel's apartheid. And just this week, in her scathing response to that disgusting, grotesque Republican Congressman Randy Fine, referred to what's happening in Gaza as a genocide. Where is this country's moral compass? That's what I want to know. Finally, she meaning Senator Slotkin, engaged in a bit of a lie about where she gets her money from, how her campaigns are funded. Let's take a quick look at that.
Do you think AIPAC should register as a foreign lobby?
I don't know the answer to that. I think that I know plenty of people who think they should. You know, I
It's
don't.
kind of a cop-out answer, don't you think?
I mean,
Yeah.
I literally, I just guess I'd have to look at the definition. I certainly have had my tough moments with that organization, and
So you stop accepting their funding?
you gotta get your facts straight. I have not been endorsed by AIPAC. I have not. I'm sorry. I was the first Jew
You were
elected to the Senate that was not endorsed by any Jewish group. AIPAC, J Street.
You've been the recipient of their funds.
In 2018, when I first ran, people who were members, yes, but I've not been endorsed since then.
You know, telling Crystal Ball that she needs to get her facts straight is rich, especially as Senator Slotkin is just lying to everyone's faces. So she makes it seem as though she received some campaign contributions from AIPAC back in 2018, but she had a real rough go at things. You know, she had a tough relationship with them. You know, they probably didn't fund her after that, except they did. And it wasn't just about AIPAC. When it comes to the Israel lobby, AIPAC of course gets a lot of attention because it's the biggest. But there's all sorts of other groups, pro-Israel groups, that fund our politicians. So let's talk a little bit about how much Alyssa Slotkin, throughout her political career, has received from the Israel lobby. Oh, so there you go. $656,095. Nice. So up through March of this year, that's how much money she has received from the lobby. Now, who knows? Maybe she was telling the truth. Maybe that was all the money she received up until 2018, and then after that, it was over. Except no, that's not the case. So she took in quite a bit of money from the Israel lobby in 2022. Fascinating. So apparently she took in $85,550 from J Street PAC, $22,000 from the Pro-Israel America PAC, and $14,906 from the American Israel Public Affairs Committee. Nice. Meaning that she was, of course, taking cash from the Israel lobby well after 2021, in 2022. So those campaign contributions, I mean, they pay off, and her voting record makes that abundantly clear. Since the war started, Alyssa Slotkin has voted for measures to fund Israel's military, impose sanctions on the International Criminal Court over arrest warrants for Israeli officials, including the very official that she has referred to as a war criminal, Benjamin Netanyahu, the prime minister. She's a loathsome, pathetic person. What do you stand for, Slotkin? You're gonna do an interview where you pretend like you give a damn about the economy? What the hell have you done for the economy? What the hell have you done to improve the lives of Michiganders? Pathetic. Let me read the rest of that graphic for you. She forbid the State Department to cite statistics from the Hamas-run Gaza Health Ministry and equate anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism. That's who Alyssa Slotkin is. Now, there was an interesting headline in the news today. I don't really care about it. It's not really gonna go anywhere. I think it's just meant for positive PR, and I'm not gonna give it to her. But she is part of a group of congressional Democrats who have introduced the Ban Corporate PACs Act. The legislation would ban corporations from establishing and managing a PAC or soliciting contributions from stakeholders and eliminate existing corporate PACs. They know it's not gonna go anywhere. I doubt they're even gonna try to fight for it to see if maybe they can get some Republicans on board to pass it in the Senate. It's not going anywhere. Let's not be stupid. And I don't know if this was done in an effort to maybe launder Slotkin's reputation after she was essentially embarrassed with that shellacking on Breaking Points, but she should be embarrassed. Because when you make clear to everyone else in the world, when you make clear to your constituents, when you make clear to Democrats, Democratic voters, that you have no moral compass, you have no actual values, and you're just gonna go along with the status quo, even though the status quo means mass slaughter of innocents. There's no, BS bill that's gonna launder your reputation. Okay, politicians like that are dead to me. I don't know about you guys. You can write in and let me know, but that's where I'm at with Alyssa Slotkin. And great job by Breaking Points. They asked the right questions. It was a fantastic interview. We'll include a link in the description box so you can watch the entirety of the conversation.
Every time you ring the bell below, an angel gets his wings. Totally not true, but it does keep you updated on our live shows. Every time you ring the bell below, an angel gets his wings. Totally not true, but it does keep you updated on our live shows.